And live.
And live, says the tech man. Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining us today on our webinar. I'm joined by Steve Lindsay, Service Management Solutions Specialist. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning. Good morning, Gary. Good morning, everybody.
Today's discussion is going to focus on a topic that we discuss quite frequently, if not through the format of webinars, then certainly in the conversations that we have with our customers, prospects, and other people in service industries. Steve, you were really keen to be on today's discussion because I guess it's a conversation that you do, as we said, have fairly frequently with people.
Indeed, yeah, it's something that often crops up through our initial conversations with companies as an area that they believe they can improve on. Yeah, and it's interesting. I think we'll get into some of the detail today, but it's interesting sort of the impact of a low first-time fixed rate can have on a business, and yeah, conversely, if you improve it, what a benefit it can be as well.
Yeah, good. It's obviously the title says, what would improving your first-time fixed rate really mean for your business? I guess we're going to focus on is we're going to look at some software today, which will give us some indicators as to actually, are there tools, what type of tools can help us maybe increase the first-time fixed rate, but also more importantly, potentially, certainly if from my perspective, although not everybody may agree, it's like, how do you have confidence in what the first time fixed rate is? So if you're going to improve it, how do you measure it? Otherwise, you're just guessing, aren't you? So we're going to look at a pretty powerful tool in relation to that as well. So let's crack on to the first slide if we can. Okay. So this is a slide that you put together, Steve, because obviously you're out there in the field having these conversations day in, day out. But a couple of them, people can see them on the screen, but a couple stood out for me. As I said, one of them being that people can't measure the first time fixed rate. Is that fairly common? Because I guess if you speak to service directors, service managers, or whatever, I guess they would feel that they have a gut instinct, or do most people have an accurate figure?
I think surprisingly more often than not, even with people with automated systems, often don't have a handle on the first time fixed rate, and or if they do, they don't have it in real time. So it's something where they're measuring it after the fact. So I guess the value of that is diminished rather than being able to see it at live and when it's going up, or more importantly going down.
Yeah, I guess we are going to see a bit later, aren't we? It's what is the impact of not being able to measure it? What else can you do with that time, etc. That's the important thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I think
things that, sorry, mate, I was going to say the other thing that stuck out for me was not having the full information available, which is mentioned in a couple of those speech bubbles you put up there. But that also is quite common, isn't it? It's at the end of the day, isn't this just about, well, not just, but isn't it largely about visibility? Isn't it about availability of information?
I think people, companies have well skilled or engineers that have the skills to fix things first time. But I think there are a lot of variables around supporting the engineer to make sure that he's got the right information, the right parts, the visibility of what's happened with that piece of equipment in the past that would help him to fix it first time and to fix it quicker. So yeah, I think you're right that it's not necessarily the engineers have the skill sets and the ability to do it. It's just having the visibility of the right information at the right time. So
yeah, it's about visibility at the point that you know about the job and you issue it, and also about visibility when you're on site as the engineer. It's a combination of the two, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. So right from the start of the process, where you're receiving a call, an email from a customer that something's gone wrong with their equipment in the field, and it's at that point that you really need to start gathering information, but also getting access to information about that particular company, about that particular site and asset.
Yeah, Some of the other things I think that stood out for me was some of these are consequences as well, aren't they? They're consequences to some of the other actions that are listed here. So we've got a bit about SLAs and unhappy customers, but they're consequences of not being able to improve that first time fix rate, aren't they?
They are, and I think that there's expectations nowadays. We've probably talked about it in other webinars around sort of on-demand generation of people want their problem solved as quickly as possible. So yeah, the not being able to fix something first time does have an impact with your relationship with your customer. You know, it can have what lead to awkward conversations of why it wasn't fixed, and you know, in some cases, some of your customers or if their equipment's down for a period of time, it's costing them a lot of money as well. So they often pass some of that cost back to the service business as well. So yeah, there's lots of variables of why you might not be hitting your first time fixed rate as high as you want, but there's also lots of consequences of that as well.
Yeah, good. All right, let's move on to the next one because I know everyone's going to be keen for us to dive into a bit of software at some point, and we've only got limited time.
Yeah,
How much are double visits actually costing you? Yeah, like we do this as well, but whenever you're looking at, you see LinkedIn or you see kind of email marketing or any kind of outbound stuff that companies like us put out there, in many respects, you look at this and you think, well, it's just kind of white noise. It doesn't really mean a lot. And this is the important bit, though, is what we're going to do now is talk about how do you actually quantify the impact, because it loses impact if you can't measure it. That's accurate, isn't it?
yeah, absolutely. And I think until you actually get into the detail of the numbers and calculate the impact that it's having on those parts of your business, you know, I was quite surprised when I've done this initially when we started using this return on investment tool to understand what the return is for people that improve the first time fixed rate, just how big the numbers started to mount up very quickly.
Yeah. It's probably, before we go into that, because we're going to do that in a second, I'm going to look at that tool. I think it's important to put some context around it. So it's a third-party tool that gives us the platform to then be able to build something specific to the conversations we have with our customers and prospects. So if you want to flick into the tool itself, and I'll put a bit of context around it. So essentially what we've got here is a way of putting information in, and if you look on the left hand side, you can see there are various categories that we can fill in because they're areas that we can identify where improvements can be made. But focusing as we are on the first time fix rate, actually what we do here is we have the ability to build this and put these numbers in as we do with our customers and prospects. So as a consequence of that, what we're trying to do, in all honesty, is we're trying to get them to own it, aren't we? We're trying to get them to own those numbers. So as you said, we've been surprised by the size of the numbers that are coming out at the back end of these calculations. So it's actually about getting that kind of buy-in from everybody that they're their numbers and therefore they have some accuracy. That's fair, isn't it?
Yeah, I think this is a tool which effectively the companies we talk to, we share this with them, and it's for them to run with and use as a tool to analyze whether there's a return or not with investing in a service management solution. So it's absolutely key that people believe the numbers that are here, and often we push them to be conservative or to go with their lower estimates of the numbers so that there's some real belief in that the numbers are achievable, and if they do invest, that they would get the return.
And I guess the reason that we preempt what we're about to do with that bit of the conversation is because the numbers that we're going to put in here as the example, although the company name in the top left is now fictitious, this is actually a process that we went through with a prospect recently, and these are real numbers that they gave us based on their business, aren't they?
They are indeed, yes, yeah.
Okay, well, let's fill it in then.
Yeah, so the first part of the calculator is trying to establish or quantify the savings that you'd get from not having to do that second visit. So it's calculate how much labour time you're going to save and fuel and so on from not having to do that second visit. So the first thing that's key to it across the business is actually how many engineers have you got out on the road doing repair work.
Yeah. Okay. I think I wrote down, so I've got the example numbers that were given to us by our prospect. And in this example, the number of engineers was 50.
Okay. So it's worked out based on the number of jobs worked by per engineer per week, the total number of jobs across the year, across all the engineers. And this bit, it sometimes is a little bit finger in the air, as we mentioned before, around people not sometimes having a real grip on the first time fix rate. But yeah, this is key, is where they are today. With
these guys, I remember, were relatively confident that the current value was around 80%.
Yeah, I think they were calculating it from historical data.
Yeah.
Okay, and then so to actually understand the amount of savings or improvement becoming made, we asked them, following demonstrations of the software, to understand where they can get this better visibility, better real-time information to help improve that fix rate, what they thought it could be.
Yeah, they went with 10%, didn't they? So increasing it to 90.
Yeah, I think that was one of the low estimate from their side. So what we've calculated here from these numbers is the amount of savings that you get from not having to have that engineer assigned to do that double visit. So you're looking at 300k a year saving from not having to go back to site and the time that it costs to do that for the engineer. And also we've got totted up the cost of an average travel time and travel distance to a job.
Yeah, it's interesting that, Steve, because before we started using tools like this, it used to be quite common to mention things like fuel savings and talk about people's carbon footprint. And whilst that's all very important and a hot topic in itself, it's in the labour, as we can see there. It clearly demonstrates, and this is why this stuff is so powerful. It clearly demonstrates that it's in the time saving and the reuse of that time, isn't it? That's where the real value is.
Yeah, I think that the cost savings are number one, but if you go into the next session, we're now looking at, you've recouped that time, so your engineer doesn't have to go back to do that double visit. So what could they use that time for? Now, if you can bill that time out, then this is the sort of when I started using the tool and working through with customers. This is the bit where often the FD would maybe fall off his chair a little bit, and the MD and the owners of the company of actually the saving from an engineer's cost perspective, if you measure it like that. But if you actually bill out, even the company we're talking to said around 70% of those hours.
Well, this sorry to interrupt, but this is a lesson we learned from the first iteration of the tool, wasn't it? So we started talking to people about time they were saving, and then actually people started saying to us, well, no, it's about what am I going to do with that time now? And we was like, okay, yeah, completely understand where you're coming from. You're going to reuse that time to do other types of work, and possibly some of that's going to be revenue generating. And then again, it was understood from the feedback that we got, well, yes, but not all of it's going to be revenue generating. There'll be a percentage of it that's done for other types of work. It might be FOC, it might be admin or whatever. So that's why we built in a calculation to accommodate for all of those eventualities and those factors, haven't we? So as we said at the start, it's about owning that number. And like you say, it's phenomenal. It's really powerful. And the hardest part of this has always been for us is getting them, as we said at the start, to own those numbers, because people look at that and think, wow, that is, that's an unbelievable amount of money for what appears on face value to be a small improvement.
Yeah, and I think when we've gone through this process and there is often is a double take and then a relook at the numbers, but yeah, when they actually go through it and how it's calculated, that you get trust and belief, and yeah, it's a real powerful tool. So often people come to us and they've got lots of frustrations with the way they're doing things with the service management systems. So they want to move, but this helps them from a rational point of view about building the justification for financial justification for improving things as well. So it's a very tool.
In previous kind of webinars and podcasts that we do, and even in a lot of the comms we put out, we've never hid the way that we run people through a process. And this is a big part of it, isn't it? Because in a lot of decision-making processes, the structure is always familiar to us because we do it a lot. So the first half of it is what you and I would describe as the kind of emotional response. So you show people how they can improve things in a better way by demonstrating the software, and people actually recognize that that delivers an improvement and they feel very positive about it. But then when you go into the second half of that process with them, you start to talk about numbers. So we give them a quote and say, well, if you want to use our solution, it costs this amount of money. And that's when things become more difficult and the process slows down, because once you take the emotion out of the wins from using a tool like ours, you're then into the numbers, aren't you? And that's where it slows down. You're then saying, how do I justify spending this money, and how do I prove what the ROI is? And that's exactly what this is, isn't it?
It is. And I think it's important, not just from the justification point of view. As you mentioned, our processes around making people's lives better through the work processes, but also making the businesses stronger, healthier, more profitable through the numbers as well. But this, I also think this tool, we often share this with our project team as well, because it's got the metrics behind measuring the success of the project. If people move forward with us and they're confident that we're measuring, we have a metric, and we can stand up in front of the owner or in front of the board after 6, 12, 18 months and say your investment with us has benefited you this way, and it's and there are firm metrics around that.
Yeah. Okay. Look, I love this tool, and I could talk about it for the next hour, but sadly, we're going to run out of time, so we do need to move on to the next bit. So this is the slide's going to lead into showing a bit of the software, which you're going to kindly do for us, Steve. Do you want to talk a little bit about this one?
Yes, I think as you mentioned right at the beginning, there's lots of different variables around that impacts the ability to deliver a good first-time fix rate. But in a general sort of high level, it's around increased visibility, access to information.
Better quality information, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a good point. Accurate quality information as early as possible within the process, and also having that visibility across your team as well. So from the call handlers to the engineers to your service manager to right up to the board as well, and to the people that manage the warehouse. So you're getting better visibility of what parts are required. The faster moving parts, optimizing your stock holding as well. So it's not just about the service controller and the engineer having visibility, it's really having that sort of insight across the business. So, and
there's not, as we often say, there isn't this kind of magic wand or magic or silver bullet where you're going to improve your first time fix rate by 50%. That's, and again, not to labor the point, but the reason that we did the bit on the ROI tool and the reason that we worked on that and created it is because we wanted to demonstrate to people that a 5 or a 10% increase, which might to some people seem quite modest, we wanted to demonstrate and quantify the value in those small percentages. That's what's really important here, isn't it?
It is, and there's things that aren't quantified around, that we mentioned at the beginning, around the quality of your relationship and conversations with your customers, and you know, that meeting your SLAs when it comes to contract renegotiation, that you fix things first time and help them, and you know, there's lots of other soft factors around it. But yeah, having that clear benefit to the business identified is key as well, to get people on board with the improvements.
Good. Okay, so, let's jump into
the software. I think we'll put some context around here. So the first thing we're going to do, this is actually my dashboard here. So we'll come back to this, but again, this is tailored to my job role. But I think that the important point for today's session is you can't manage what you can't measure. So being very clear what your current performance on first time fixed rate is, and we'll drill down into some of the analysis that we can get behind that. But we're going to start off at the beginning of a process. So somebody either emails in or calls up the office and says one of their pieces of equipment are down. They give you the postcode. So we're going to search for the customer in question, which is Mornflake. So this program service call is about providing as much information within 1 or 2 clicks for the service controller to start. They might not be a trained engineer, but giving them the information to start triaging what might be the problem for them. So as an example here, you know, first time fixed rate can be affected by as simple as not getting access to site. So
yeah, I spotted that one when you pulled it up. I was like, actually, I'd not thought about that. But you're right, we do have those conversations where people arrive on site and they'll be very, depending on the environment that you're going into, there'll be very specific requirements for PPE or something like that, won't there?
Yeah, it could be that the equipment might be on a ceiling, on racking, so you might need access equipment to the lifts, ladders. It might be that you need a certain accreditation. It might be on a school site, so you need to have certain accreditations to get on there as well. So you know, it stops you from assigning an engineer that doesn't have that and not being able to get access and having to send another engineer out, which happens more often.
Yeah, it's just as we said, it's very simple stuff that, but it's just about transparency and quality of information at the outset, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And so we've got some visibility of being prompted the important things around this particular customer. We've also getting the same prompts around the individual piece of equipment. So this is something that's editable that you can flag up. So anytime you bring up somebody calls up about this individual item asset, there may be something that you want to flag up very, very clearly to the call handler. But also, very importantly, through this program, we've got visibility at a site level and also at an individual asset level, what's actually happened with this piece of equipment in the past. So somebody's rung up and they've got an issue, but maybe they've had that issue previously. Maybe an engineer's was at site recently as well. So we've got access to the service information and details around the asset, but also things like quotations. So it may be that we quoted last month to replace a filter on a particular piece of equipment. But what I find really powerful, or service controllers find really powerful at this stage, for this particular asset, we can drill down. We've got visibility of all the jobs that have happened since the beginning of time by the company on that asset.
Yeah.
So, you know, this is a full history of each individual job. So there's a lot of quality information, and you can drill down into these. But an example might be for this job 455. Well, actually, let's have a look at the work done notes there. So it's telling me that last time or a couple of jobs ago, the engine was running hot. There was they unblocked the filter, but it might need changing soon.
Yeah.
So, you know, having that at a couple of clicks and visibility of what the engineer saw on the last jobs is very powerful, and it gives you that extra visibility. And it's not just around the job history. You can analyze what parts have been used on that particular piece of equipment previously, and even at the volume. So, you know, you're looking, if the engineer's been to site previously, they've often had to fit springs or springs or an oil filter as well. So again, the service controller must be thinking, well, maybe the engineer I need to send must have an oil filter on his van, from the parts that have been used previously and from the last couple of jobs as well. So you're already starting to improve your chances, the percentage of you getting that fixed first time.
Mm.
So what I'm going to do now is raise this particular job. So I'm going to just give the information for the engineer. The engine's running hot. So this is information that the engineer will see on the tablet. So it's good to put as much quality information on here as possible. We're then going to suggest we'll do it today, put in the times that we've agreed with the customer. And I'm just going to say, for the sake of it, it's going to be a couple of hours to do that work. So very quickly, we've entered the information to raise the job. And the bit I wanted to mention is just telling me there's already a job for that customer. I wanted to add it and make efficient use of his time. But for the purposes of the webinar, I'll take you through here. So we've talked about getting some quality information when you actually raise the call and visibility, but it's now about, we've got some history about that asset and that customer, about what might be wrong. We need to make sure we've got the right engineer with the right skill set attending, and also we've seen that the certain parts they've needed on that site, so let's get the right engineer with the right parts available on his van as well.
Okay.
So we can select at this point and search for, say, I think it's a mechanical, search for skill, our engineer resource for skill set, mechanical skill set available. And then it brings up the engineers that have the relevant capability, we believe, to fix the work. And we select those and add them to the job. And now we're going to actually reserve it to their time in the calendar as well. And I confirm that job. Also, as we're going through to the scheduler, we could also, the controller can have a quick look at the stock availability. So we believe that maybe an oil filter may be a good chance that that's going to be required for this particular visibility. We can also see which of our engineer team have stock available for that particular filter as well. So
right, so on the left you've got they're the stock locations, I'm assuming.
Indeed, yes. So we've got the particular item that we think we may need for this job is available at a number of our branches, at depots, but also on our engineers' van stock as well. So
the engineer vans themselves are stock locations from a system point of view, aren't they?
Absolutely, yeah. And yeah, so the engineers have got visibility of and the engineers can make this inquiry as well on their mobile. So it's around getting that 360 understanding of where the parts are that they're going to need for that particular job.
Okay.
So I'm now going to actually pull that onto the. As you can see, the job that I've just raised here is populated onto the diary. What's also important for the service controller at this point, we've identified the engineer with the right skill set and has the right parts available. Well, through this planning tool, we've also got visibility of the location of the job in particular, and also the location of our engineers up on, I think one's on holiday there, on a cruise maybe.
Looks like that.
It does. So you get visibility of the engineer's location, the job location. Then you can start making decisions around who's the best person to assign to that job based on geographical location, as well as skill set and parts availability.
Steve, one question that's slightly unrelated, just because I know everyone watching will be thinking the same thing, is what are the red and green colours on the jobs?
So yes, we use color coding to make it very visual about the state of the job status. So
I was thinking more the blocks, under the job number.
Sorry.
The left-hand side job number. See where you got 448 ticked.
Yeah.
So you got the green and the red blocks surrounding the job number, haven't you?
Yeah. So again, this is a visual tool of understand that those coloured blocks change colour based on the performance against the service level agreement that's in
right
for that particular customer. So as you can see at the top here, we've got a couple of green ones. They'll turn to amber the closer we get to the SLA. And if we go over it or get close to it, it goes to red. So this
understood. So 444, for example, is red because the agreed visit date was yesterday, which has an SLA associated with it.
Yeah, exactly that.
That's fine. I just looking at it, I was like, I know people are going to be wondering what that is. Thanks for clearing that up.
Okay, and then what we're going to do now is actually go into what the engineer sees from their tablet. So these are the guys that are out on the road doing the work, get visibility of what they see on the job. So I'm just going to open up our Service Gene mobile application. So this runs on a tablet mobile device on either Android or on Apple, and it works. Majority of the functionality work offline, so you can be down a lift shaft or in a way out of a mobile signal and can still continue to do the work. But if we're getting back to the topic around getting information for the engineer so that they can start working on the job. We've got a reason for the call here. So the engine's running hot and the filter's blocked recently.
Yeah.
At the bottom, we've got the site prompts around with the PPE that's required.
Yeah.
And then we can actually just sorry, my device, the AirDroid's frozen on the.
Probably just timed out.
So the AirDroid software is software used to display the mobile device. So as we've got the call description and the site notes, the site prompt that we saw for the service controller is fully visible for the engineer. We've got detail about that particular asset.
Just play that up for us again, Steve.
So I have.
There you go, perfect.
So the engineer's going to site, he can check these parts availability, but he could also get the same information that the service controller had view of through the Office software. So engineer can again look at the job history about this particular asset. So it's connecting to the server. So then they've got information again around the job history.
So what was going on there was, understand from what you're saying, it's actually, it literally is looking at the same information, because by virtue of the fact that it was connected to the server, it's actually going back to the main database and pulling that information out, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's important. So I mentioned before, you can carry on with your job without having an internet connection, but this at the moment, this inquiry to get that extra level of information, it is querying the system and accessing the same information which is available to the rest of the business, even though he's an engineer out in the field.
Yeah. Well, that's great, because that ensures that the data that both sides are seeing, both in the back office and in the field, it's literally up to the second accurate, isn't it?
Absolutely. So as soon as we update anything on the mobile, it's automatically synced and visible to the office, and vice versa as well. So maybe the customer rings up with some more information about the job as the engineers go in there. The office can update that,
Yeah.
automatically crops up onto the engineer's device. So this is the same job that we looked at previously, and the engineers also got visibility of any photographs or any documents. So, as he's approaching site, before he gets on there, he's also got a lot of information about that particular asset, what's happened recently, and probably that's giving him a good heads up of the things to start looking at when he gets there on. So it's not.
You and I don't think have ever been engineers, unless I don't know something about your previous work experience, Steve. But what we do know from talking to people in these industries and engineers all day in, day out is it is fairly common, isn't it, for engineers to resolve a problem based on information they're given historically, and normally what happens is it just takes a bit longer than this, and it might involve duplicate visits, or it might involve an engineer that was there previously having to go back, or it might more commonly be just conversations between engineers on the mobile device saying, right, I know you were on here last, Steve, what happened, anything I should be aware of, or I know you fixed this problem previously. That is a lot of how people resolve these problems, isn't it?
It is, yeah, and the engineers have the ability to add documents to equipment and to sites as well, and it can be simple as a site map of locating the right assets if it's on a big site as well. So the engineers can support each other by adding that type of documentation, and also you can have things like access to maintenance manuals. As well, work instructions. So if there isn't if there is a particular issue they find which they've not done previously or recently, they can also access the manual and get a real good understanding direction of how to do things. So we've pulled up a document here that's visible to the engineers. So there's a lot of information that sat behind this application on the device to support the engineer to fix first time and as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and of course that is the point of all of today's discussion, isn't it? And yeah, just that itself, being able to see we quite often get asked about attaching manuals to jobs and making them available in the field. A lot of people, when if you like, the concept of a mobile device being taken out by an engineer was first developed, people were loading these, like every manual that they would possibly need. They were having to put them locally on every single device. So to be able to access it on the fly like that is fantastic.
Brilliant. So that's some of the information the engineer has visible. And I guess this comes back right to the start around measuring your current performance, and if something is going wrong with the current performance, the ability to understand what the issue is behind that performance and drill down to it as well. So I think it's just to nicely wrap up the process from start to finish. We mentioned around having a live visibility of the first time fix rate on the service controller or the service manager's desktop here. But if things are, this is coloured red, because it's at quite a low level here through our demonstration system. But it's quite important to have the ability. All right, the first time fix rate isn't great, but why isn't it great? So we can then drill down and use analysis tools such as this visualization in the middle here.
To summarize, we've been talking about how you kind of quantify that first time fix rate and ways in which technology tools can help you improve it, albeit by small percentages, but importantly, how much value that represents. And I think we've hopefully demonstrated to people there that it is worth focusing on, and there are tools that can help you. And actually, there are tools that can help you quantify it so that you can then you can justify it in those conversations that you have internally. And I think for me anyway, that's been really valuable and I've really enjoyed it. So thank you. Steve, have you got any parting comments you want to make before we wrap up?
No, I think you summarised very well there. So we're obviously keen to talk to anybody who'd like to delve into the particular issues around, if they're looking to improve first time fixed rates, we're very happy to share the tool and work that through with you and see whether we can help improve some of those areas.
Fantastic. Well, your contact details are on screen, Steve. So yeah, if anybody wants to have a chat, then we'd be more than happy to. I'm sure we'll be back on to another webinar soon, and I'm sure, Steve, you will join us again at some point as well. So until then, thank you very much for watching, and we will speak to you all very soon.
Cheers, take care.